Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, April 9, 2025. President Donald Trump pauses reciprocal tariffs for 90 days, midway through the first full day they were in effect, citing the more than 75 countries which have reached out to the U.S. to negotiate ways to reduce their trade imbalances, and also telling reporters that people were getting a little yippy, a little afraid because we have a big job to do. President also increases tariffs on China to 125%, saying that China, by continuing to retaliate against U.S. tariffs, has shown a lack of respect to world markets. Stock market reaction: the Dow Jones Industrial Average up today, 2,900 points. The House debates the Senate version of the budget resolution, which some conservative House Republicans say does not cut federal spending enough compared to the original House-passed bill. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem meets with families of victims of crimes committed by migrants in the U.S. illegally, while the wife of a Maryland man illegally deported to El Salvador by the Trump administration meets with members of Congress and pleads for his return. A former Facebook employee, now a whistleblower, testifies before a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee about Facebook's alleged dealings with the Chinese Communist Party, and NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, who has made the trip to outer space as a private citizen, testifies before the Senate Commerce Committee. CNBC writes that President Donald Trump on Wednesday dropped tariffs under his new trade plan to 10% on imports from most countries as he announced a 90-day pause for higher so-called reciprocal tariffs that took effect on many countries this week. The president credited his decision to pause the full effect of the tariffs on the fact that more than 75 countries have contacted U.S. officials to negotiate trade imbalance issues. Those negotiations will continue during the pause. The president also said in a social media post that he was raising tariffs imposed on imports from China to 125% effective immediately due to the lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets. That was from CNBC. China had announced tariffs on U.S. goods would increase to 84% from 34% starting April 10th after President Trump had imposed a 104% tariff that began at midnight. Wall Street reacting to the pause on most tariffs. The Dow up 2,962, NASDAQ up 1,857, S&P up 474. President Trump answered reporters' questions about today's decision on tariffs. During an unrelated event, he was outside the White House with auto racing champions from NASCAR, IndyCar, and IMSA.
Yeah. You started the morning saying be cool, and just a few hours later, there was a pause put in on the tariffs. Can you walk us through what you were thinking about why you decided to put a 90-day pause?
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions. Because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents, they wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, you know, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. And somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable. So I'm honored to have done it. And, you know, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well, and they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75, and they all want to come. And they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen. They'll call John, they'll do somebody, they'll go through somebody, but they're all calling, how do we do this? They all want to make a deal. Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out amazing. I think that our country is going to be at the end of a year or shorter, but I think we're going to have something that nobody would have dreamt possible. A man like Roger Penske, I don't want to get him in trouble with China, so I won't, but he would know that you have to, someday you have to cut the bow and you have to do what you have to do, right, Roger? And that's what I did, and I'm very happy to have done it.
President Donald Trump outside the White House with Roger Penske, auto racing team owner, as the president welcomed champions from various auto racing organizations, but getting reporters' questions on the tariff issue. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke to reporters outside the White House as well, different time, different place, about the tariffs. You're also going to hear during the exchange with reporters White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
We saw the successful negotiating strategy that President Trump implemented a week ago today. It has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they are in this very spot, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. So every country in the world who wants to come and negotiate, we are willing to hear you. We're going to go down to a 10% baseline tariff for them, and China will be raised to 125 due to their insistence on escalation.
Secretary, thank you for doing this. Let me ask you three quick things, if I could. For the sake of clarity, because the markets are open and they're wondering. First of all, Mexico and China, are they part of this 10% universal?
China.
Mexico and Canada, are they part of the 10%?
Yes.
Okay. Second, given then that you have the rest of the world essentially calling it, it's not China, is this now just all about China?
Well, it's about bad actors. And what we will see is some of the very early countries are China's neighbors. We're going to see, I'm seeing Vietnam today, Japan's at the front of the queue, South Korea, India. So we will see. And as I've repeatedly said, and President Trump has been saying it for years, China is the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they are the biggest source of the U.S. trade problems. And indeed, they are problems for the rest of the world, because what we've seen is that as the U.S. announced the tariff wall last week, many of those goods have already started flooding into Europe.
So as you see it now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world?
Well, I'm not calling it a trade war, but I'm saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that, and we are going to work on a solution with our trading partners.
Excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China, when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Treasury Secretary Bessent. Can you explain more of the decision making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, these went into effect less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why the pause now? What led to that?
No. Again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago? The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we have just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating and escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. The 90-day pause when there was some tariffs, is that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was, what we saw in the stock markets, a part of this decision?
No, it's because because of the large number of inbounds, we've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, along with the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, speaking to reporters outside the White House. Earlier in the day, before the president announced the 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs and the increase in tariffs on China, the European Union announced the approval of retaliatory tariffs against $23 billion of U.S. goods, scheduled to take effect April 15th. United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer was testifying before the House Ways and Means Committee on Capitol Hill when the president made his latest tariffs announcement, and Congressman Stephen Horsford, Democrat from Nevada, asked the trade rep about it.
Are you aware that the tariffs have been paused?
I am, yes.
When were you made aware of that?
Well, I understood the decision was made a few minutes ago. And
sitting here
under discussion.
Sitting here under discussion. So did you know that this was under discussion, and why did you not include that as part of your opening remarks?
So typically what I don't do is divulge the contents of my discussions with
What are the
President
details of the pause?
Well, my understanding is that because so many countries have decided not to retaliate, we're going to have about 90 days.
No, excuse me? China increased their tariffs on the United States. Trump blinked.
What's the blink, sir?
What do you know about this pause? What are the details of it?
Well, the details, as I understand it, is that China continues to retaliate. Other countries didn't retaliate. The president 2 or 3 days ago said we wanted to negotiate with those countries that asked for meetings. That's what we're doing.
What are the details? How long is the pause? How many days? How many weeks?
I understand it's 90 days. I haven't spoken to the president since I've been in this
So the trade
hearing.
Representative hasn't spoken to the President of the United States about a global reordering of trade.
Yes, I have. I've just been in the hearing with you, sir.
But yet he announced it on a tweet? WTF? Who's in charge?
The President of the United States is in charge.
And what do you know about those details?
Well, as I mentioned...
it looks like your boss just pulled the rug out from under you and paused the tariffs, the taxes on the American people. There's no strategy. You just found out 3 seconds ago, sitting here, we saw you.
We've been discussing a variety of
If you came here knowing that you were going to be turned off, that these tariffs were going to be turned off, why didn't you include that in your opening statement? Why didn't you reference that as part of your testimony?
Well, I don't disclose my conversations with the president, sir.
These were specific questions we asked you all along. What's the strategy? These are real consequences for the American people and small businesses. I had a group of small businesses in my office earlier today talking about the impacts of these tariffs on aluminum and steel. This is amateur hour, and it needs to stop. What does this even mean for your negotiating strategy? How are you in charge of negotiation if the president is tweeting about this from wherever the hell he is?
The president was elected, and he runs the trade policy, and I advise him and execute his trade policy.
Who executes the trade policy?
I execute the trade policy.
Did you know that this was happening?
We have been discussing all kinds of
And there's another
options.
member of the cabinet, Bessent, who just canceled coming to the Hill to avoid talking about the market because it's in turmoil. This in just days because there was no strategy, there was no plan. The president chose to take actions that he didn't even have the authority to take. He's put our economy in disarray and near collapse.
Congressman Stephen Horsford, Democrat from Nevada, questioning the United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer at today's House Ways and Means Committee hearing looking at tariffs. Bill Ackman, founder of Pershing Square Capital Management, posted on X earlier today, if the president doesn't pause the effect of the tariffs soon, many small businesses will go bankrupt. Medium-sized businesses will be next. And after the president announced the 90-day pause, Bill Ackman posted, "This was brilliantly executed by President Trump, textbook art of the deal." From Time magazine, Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, on Wednesday called on Congress to investigate whether President Trump engaged in insider trading or market manipulation when he abruptly paused a sweeping set of tariffs, a move that sent stock prices skyrocketing. Schiff tells Time, "I'm going to do my best to find out. Family meme coins and all the rest of it are not beyond insider trading or enriching themselves. I hope to find out soon." Michigan Advance had a story before the president's tariff pause. Stepping on stage in Washington, D.C. Wednesday morning, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer laid out her plan to rejuvenate American manufacturing, centering her strategy on shipbuilding, aviation, and semiconductor chips. However, that vision faced a big hurdle as President Donald Trump launched a global trade war, placing tariffs on allies and enemies alike and creating broad uncertainty for businesses in Michigan and across the nation. Head of a planned meeting with the president and speaking at a rented venue about a block from the White House, the governor played to her bipartisan background while still not mincing words on the way the president's tariffs have impacted Michigan, noting that 20% of the state's economy is tied to the auto industry, which depends on international trading partners. That was the story from Michigan Advance. Here's part of Governor Whitmer's speech today in Washington.
I understand the motivation behind the tariffs. And I can tell you, here's where President Trump and I do agree. We do need to make more stuff in America. More cars and chips. More steel and ships. We do need fair trade. No state has lived through the consequences of offshoring and outsourcing more than Michigan. We know that when you lose a factory, it doesn't just mean losing those jobs. Losing people means losing resources. It means fewer police officers and underfunded schools. It means less housing being built and fewer roads fixed. It's a loss of purpose and identity. So while I share the president's goal of bringing good-paying middle-class manufacturing jobs back, it's got to be done right. Reindustrialization could have huge ripple effects, since manufacturing has the highest economic multiplier of any sector. Every dollar spent to make something triggers a chain reaction of material purchases, job growth, and supply chain, and more economic growth. So as I've said before, I'm not against tariffs outright, but it is a blunt tool. You can't just pull out the tariff hammer to swing at every problem without a clear, defined end goal. We cannot underestimate or underappreciate the time and capital it's going to take to actually bring jobs and supply chains back home. So there's not a shortcut here. Strategic reindustrialization must be a bipartisan project that spans multiple presidential administrations. So to get it done, we've got to work with our friends and compete against our adversaries. We need to be strategic about tariffs on the technology we actually want to make in America and on industries where we already have a sizable competitive advantage. Let's carve out autos and energy, both of which are critical to manufacturers and directly impact people's wallets. Finally, to the extent that tariffs are a strategic tool in an economic toolbox, let's use all of the new revenue to reinvest in American businesses and in our workers.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Democrat of Michigan, this morning in Washington, D.C., giving a speech near the White House before a meeting with President Donald Trump, and this was before the president announced the 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs and the increase in tariffs on China. From ABC News, House Republicans are exhausting all legislative tools to prevent future votes on repealing President Donald Trump's tariffs, doubling down on their support for the administration's policies. GOP leaders on Wednesday inserted language into the rule for the budget blueprint that would prohibit the House until at least September from forcing a vote on legislation to rescind the president's national emergency authority. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, defended the move, telling reporters, "I've made it very clear I think the president has executive authority. It's an appropriate level of authority to deal with the unfair trade practices. That's part of the role of the president to negotiate with other countries." Reporting from ABC News. Congressman Jim McGovern, Democrat of Connecticut, ranking member on the Rules Committee, protested the change during debate on the House floor.
My amendment will simply strike Section 2 of the rule. That section, tucked in the rule by Republicans this morning, prevents the House from voting on Trump's disastrous worldwide tariffs. You know, the ones destroying the economy and raising prices on regular Americans. Just before I came down here, I guess Trump said on social media that he is partially pausing some of the reciprocal tariffs for 90 days. Oh, cool, a 90-day pause. That is certainly the certainty that the business community is looking for. How is any company supposed to forecast for their future, build a plant, hire workers, if they have no idea what the hell this president is going to do in his next tweet? But we went from the president saying on social media today, "Be cool," to then saying, "Just kidding. We have a 90-day pause in a matter of hours." I mean, I have whiplash. I need a neck brace to be able to get through all of this. Also, the president announced that he is hiking the tariffs on China to 125% and keeping the 10% tariffs across the board. Great. Get ready to continue to pay more for almost everything. And what about the EU? They retaliated with tariffs against us this morning, too. Are we going to treat them like China and punch back, as the White House press secretary says that we're doing? I guess we don't have any clarity on that question. And here's the worst part, Mr. Speaker. The Congress could stop this madness and provide the certainty that is needed by voting on these tariffs. But it seems like Republicans are fighting tooth and nail, not to stop the insanity, but to keep Congress from having a say about these tariffs, to hide from doing their jobs. With this provision hidden in the rule, they're stopping the entire House from bringing up legislation to put an end to these tariffs. Not pause them, end them. Legislation which, under the law, any member should be able to bring to the floor 14 days from now.
Congressman Jim McGovern, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member on the Rules Committee on the House floor. The House went on to pass that resolution that he mentioned, which put in the prohibition of taking the House vote on the president's emergency declaration that he's used to authorize tariffs. But over in the Senate, a bipartisan group has introduced a similar resolution to repeal the president's global tariffs. Sponsors include Finance Committee ranking member Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, and Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky. The House today also debated the Senate version of the budget resolution for fiscal year 2025. CQ has a fact sheet explaining that the budget resolution activates the budget reconciliation process for legislation that cannot be filibustered, through which Republicans aim to negotiate a bill to enact much of President Trump's policy agenda. But there are differences between the House and Senate versions, again from the CQ fact sheet. While allowing the House to provide up to $4.5 trillion in tax cuts if $2 trillion in spending cuts can be found, the Senate effectively provides for $5.2 trillion in tax cuts, including $3.7 trillion to extend the 2017 tax cut set to expire, which would be scored as having no cost and would be permanent under a current policy baseline, and $1.5 trillion in other tax cuts. The Senate calls for $2 trillion in cuts to mandatory spending and other savings, but requires only $4 billion, while the House requires at least $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. The Senate instructions also provide for raising the debt limit by up to $5 trillion versus $4 trillion for the House. That was from CQ. Here's some of the House debate. Congressman Ron Estes, Republican from Kansas, supporting the Senate version, now back in the House.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of advancing President Trump's America First agenda. It was less than 2 months ago that I stood on this House floor as Republicans passed our budget resolution, putting a marker in the ground to restore and secure our country, both physically and financially. While I don't think this resolution goes far enough, the resolution that we're about to pass today is a positive step forward, and it's what Americans demanded 5 months ago. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to talk directly with President Trump in the West Wing. He's asking Republicans to support this budget resolution to move the process forward. This resolution is only one more step in the process to obtain these positive results. Voting yes means voting for a secure border and economic growth. By voting yes, we're voting for a path to make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. It means making economic growth provisions like research and development, the small business pass-through, interest deductibility, and immediate expensing permanent parts of our tax code. A yes vote prevents the largest tax increase for Americans in history. As a fiscal hawk who will continue to work with the
gentleman's time's expired
to rein in reckless spending, I'm voting yes.
Congressman Ron Estes, Republican from Kansas, on the House floor. Congressman Lloyd Smucker, Republican from Pennsylvania, said that he would be a no on today's vote. He's going to reference Congressman Jody Arrington, Republican of Texas, the Budget Committee chair, who was managing the time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman for yielding. I want to say first that it has been a great pleasure of mine to work with the chairman over the past few months. He's done an incredible job leading the Budget Committee and leading our conference to a bill passed out of the House that not only extended the tax cuts, it secured the border, it unleashes American energy, it funds our military, all of the priorities, all of the mandates, makes good on the mandates that the American people have given us and have given the president in this past election. And I'll say first that it is, I think, important to every member of the Republican conference in the House, and I believe every Republican member in the Senate as well, to extend those tax cuts to drive an economy that is working for Americans and drive additional growth in the economy. So that's what came out of the House, and so I was very disappointed to see very, very different instructions to the Senate that I just think are not serious. I believe that we have to do these tax cuts. And what I think is also important to every member of the House, we know the fiscal trajectory that we're on. We know this won't end well if we constrain, if we don't restrain our runaway spending. I think this is our opportunity to do it, and the $4 billion floor in spending savings in that Senate bill just simply are not acceptable. There are those who argue that we'll be working on this, and we'll still come up with a good bill. But to me, it's important we have the guardrails in the initial resolution. I think there's a reason for the initial resolution. It's to set up the framework for what this reconciliation will look like. And so, unfortunately today, unusual for me, but I will not be able to support this bill on the floor. I will be voting no on this bill.
I think the gentleman in reserve. I give the gentleman 15 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 15 seconds.
Again, with what I started with, it's very important we get this bill done. There is a better path forward. We have an amendment that could be passed in this bill that would satisfy where the Senate is, where the House is. And as I said, I can't vote on this bill as it is, but there's a pathway forward here that is very, very important.
Congressman Lloyd Smucker, Republican from Pennsylvania, on the House floor as the House debated the Senate changes to what the House had passed with the budget resolution. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leader, said the Democrats as a whole will be voting no.
So we're here to make it clear, hands off Medicaid, hands off the health care of the United States of America, hands off nutritional assistance, hands off veterans, hands off everyday Americans struggling to make ends meet. Republicans do nothing to lower the high cost of living. In fact, you're making the affordability crisis in America worse, not better. Then you target earned benefits and things that are important to the American people, like Medicaid, to visit upon it such an extreme cut. And what are you doing it for? What is it in service of? All to pass massive tax breaks for your billionaire donors like Elon Musk. The president himself has made that clear. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. How extraordinary is that? As Democrats, We support tax cuts for everyday Americans, tax cuts for small businesses, tax cuts for family farmers, tax cuts for those who need relief, not tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. And so we stand in strong opposition to this GOP tax scam. It's the reason why, Mr. Speaker, I've said, let's debate this on the House floor directly, through a colloquy, transparently, to make it clear to the American people where we stand and where Republicans stand at such a fragile moment with so many people in this country struggling to make ends meet.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leader on the House floor. And at about 6:45 p.m. Eastern, as we go to air, the vote on the Senate version of the budget resolution in the House has not taken place, but you can follow it on C-SPAN television and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. We'll keep you updated here on C-SPAN Radio. The Hill reporting that Congressman Elise Stefanik, Republican from New York, is getting a seat back at the House Republican leadership table and her spots back on House committees as she returns to the lower chamber after President Trump withdrew her nomination to be UN ambassador over concerns about the slim GOP majority. Speaker Mike Johnson is appointing Stefanik to be chairwoman of the House Republican leadership, according to a release from her office, a speaker-appointed position that is outlined in the conference's rules but is often vacant. Stefanik will also return to be a senior member of the House Intelligence Committee, as well as have her seats on the Armed Services Committee and Education and Workforce Committee, she said in a statement. That from The Hill. Washington Today continues in a moment.
The weekly podcast is a unique offering from C-SPAN. We record it right here in the C-SPAN radio studios in beautiful downtown Capitol Hill. In a town where extremes get so much attention, this isn't more extreme opinion, it's extreme history, connecting the old with the new. Hear what's happening right now against the backdrop of the history you know. So listen, follow, and enjoy the C-SPAN radio podcast, The Weekly. And have friends and family who love political history and even love C-SPAN's coverage of politics? Tell them about it too. Find C-SPAN's The Weekly wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. The Senate today confirmed more of President Trump's nominations for ambassadorships. Mike Huckabee for U.S. Ambassador to Israel. The vote was 53-46. Senator John Fetterman, Democrat of Pennsylvania, the only Democrat to vote yes with Republicans. Ronald Johnson was confirmed to be U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, 49-46 party line. Pete Hoekstra to be U.S. Ambassador to Canada, 60-37. 9 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus voted yes with Republicans. And Kevin Cabrera to be U.S. Ambassador to Panama, 51-45. 1 Democrat voting yes, Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem met today with families of victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. The National reports that Voice, Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement, which was created by President Donald Trump during his first term, was dismantled by the Biden administration in 2021 and replaced with an alternative service. And this office, established with the purpose of acknowledging and serving the needs of victims and families who have been affected by individuals with a connection to immigration violations, and that it's being resurrected. Here is the Homeland Security Secretary.
We were spending some time together with these families behind me and sharing their stories, but also sharing about what this office will do, the work that it will do in bringing grieving families together, but also the advocacy that it can facilitate for them going forward and helping prevent future tragedies like theirs, but also bringing together folks for real solutions and policy, not just at the federal level, but also for state and local level as well. It was a powerful time together, and it did go longer than expected, but for me, I'll be forever changed by the stories these families told, the details they told me, but also the advice and wisdom that they've given from years of suffering and grief, but also knowing that loss in your life changes everything forever. Listening to them speak you recognize the reality of what grief is. That when you lose someone that is this important to you in your life, that forever, the rest of your life is determined by that day. That everything that you reference from that is, though that was before they were taken from us, or that happened after the day we lost Jocelyn, or that happened before Drew was killed in an overdose. And that is what these families' lives were forever changed by what happened to them and what gives them the strength to stand up here now and continue to tell their stories. I truly believe that one of the greatest honors of getting to be the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security is getting to interact with Americans like these families that don't believe that they have special gifts or talents or think that they have something incredible within them that makes them want to stand up in front of people and share their stories. It's that they have incredible strength because of what happened to them, and because they found that strength within them to tell their stories and their testimony, that they literally saved America. I believe that by them telling these stories, they woke up the American public to make a change in leadership in this country, that now we have consequences for people who break the law. Now there is enforcement of our laws, that people know that it matters when you do right, and there are going to be severe consequences when you do wrong.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem today at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, in Washington, D.C., with the family members of the victims of crimes committed by those in the country who are undocumented, and the announcement of the resurrection of an office at the Department of Homeland Security called Voice Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement. CNN reports that Acting Internal Revenue Service Commissioner Melanie Krause informed her staff Tuesday she's leaving the agency amid internal chaos and the exodus of several senior IRS officials, according to 2 current IRS employees and 1 former IRS employee. Krause's decision to accept the agency's deferred resignation comes on the heels of the IRS and Department of Homeland Security finalizing an agreement Monday to provide sensitive taxpayer data to federal immigration authorities to help the Trump administration locate and deport undocumented immigrants. That was from CNN. The Secretary, Kristi Noem, was asked about it.
We've heard all about ICE investigations that have brought justice to these families. Earlier this week, it became clear that ICE will begin sharing information and requesting information from the IRS to aid in its criminal investigations. I'd like to know, when will that sharing begin? Given this information is usually guarded, what information will ICE now have access to? And how will that be used to aid ICE in arresting individuals here illegally?
Yes, so this is an unprecedented announcement that in partnership and agreement that has been made between ICE and the department in order to make sure that we're using every tool that we have to go after criminals. I think the American people need to be confident in the fact that their personal privacy will be protected and that this will be a targeted agreement that will go specifically after individuals who do perpetuate violence and enact crimes in this country. We'll continue to talk about the specifics of the agreement, but right now that needs to be unveiled in a way that is transparent to the public and in full, and so we'll be giving that to you.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus Chair, Congressman Adriano Espaillat, Democrat of New York, called for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was wrongly deported by the Trump administration to El Salvador, to be brought home immediately. A Reuters article explains the Justice Department, in a Supreme Court filing on Monday, stated that while Abrego Garcia was removed to El Salvador through administrative error, his actual removal from the United States was not error. The error, department lawyers wrote, was in removing him specifically to El Salvador despite a deportation protection order he received in 2019. Justice Department lawyers said that Abrego Garcia, as an alleged member of the criminal gang MS-13, is no longer eligible for the protection. Trump's administration has designated MS-13 as a foreign terrorist organization. Abrego Garcia's lawyers have denied the allegation that he is part of a gang. That was from Reuters. Here's Congressman Espaillat at a news conference today on Capitol Hill.
This is someone that has not broken any laws whatsoever, has been legally here in the United States of America, and was, in my opinion, kidnapped and sent back to El Salvador, to a Salvadorian prison. And so we are concerned and we're demanding that he's brought back to his family. Okay, we want to hear from the family first because they want to share their story with you. And I think America deserves to know their story. We've been joined by Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, and the country needs to hear this story. This effort against immigrants is not just against someone that maybe committed a violent crime and went to court and was found guilty. This has impacted people that are legally here, including U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens that don't fit the profile are also being scapegoated. They're being stopped, interrogated, and moved around. I met with one of those folks in New York City who was interrogated for 2 hours, although he had a federal ID with him and was a U.S. citizen, as were his children and wife. So we're here for Kilmer today. He deserves to be next to his family. He has broken no law. There is no reason why he should have been sent back to a prison, and we are demanding that he comes back.
Congressman Adriano Espaillat, Democrat from New York, chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, at a news conference on Capitol Hill. As he mentioned, the family of Kilmer Abrego Garcia was there, including his wife, Jennifer Vasquez Sura, who said, "I'm still fighting for you."
On March 12th, my husband Kilmer was abducted and disappeared by the Trump administration. It's been 28 days since I lost on my husband. Since his children hugged him, since his mother kissed him, since his brother has talked to him. Court ruled that indeed this should have never happened. The rule that my life partner Kilmer should have returned home 50 hours ago. But here I am again today, standing before you, pleading that you continue to uplift his story and remember his name, because the Trump administration and the Bukele administration continues to delay the reunification of my family. This so-called administration error has destroyed my family's happiness, my children's innocence. Kilmer, if you can hear me, I'm still fighting for you. Your brother, your mother, our children are still fighting for you. We're not going to give up hope.
Jennifer Vasquez Sura, the wife of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, at a news conference with House and Senate Democrats today on Capitol Hill. Story from Associated Press. New York City Mayor Eric Adams' administration is allowing federal immigration officials to operate at Rikers Island to work on gang and drug-related criminal investigations in the city's largest lockup. But immigrant rights groups and Adams critics cast the Tuesday executive order as a concerning quid pro quo after federal prosecutors dropped corruption charges against the Democrat so he could support the Republican President Donald Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. That article from AP. And this is Washington Today. From Washington Post, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on Wednesday focused again on China's presence in the Western Hemisphere one day after calling the world power a threat to the Panama Canal. Speaking at a regional security conference, Hegseth said that China-based companies were controlling land and critical infrastructure in strategic sectors. He called on the region's government to work together to deter China and address threats posed by transnational drug cartels and mass immigration. The visit comes amid tensions over U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated assertions that the U.S. is being overcharged to use the Panama Canal and that China has influence over its operations, allegations that Panama has denied. That was from the Washington Post. Here is Secretary Hegseth.
China-based companies are capturing land, critical infrastructure in strategic sectors, such as energy and telecommunications. China's military has too large of a presence in the Western Hemisphere. They operate military facilities and ground stations that extend their reach into space. They exploit natural resources and land to fuel China's global military ambitions. China's factory fishing fleets are stealing food from our nations and from our people. Make no mistake, Beijing is investing and operating in this region for military advantage and unfair economic gain. We do not seek war with China. And war with China is certainly not inevitable. We do not seek it in any form. But together, we must prevent war by robustly and vigorously deterring China's threats in this hemisphere. President Trump has made it clear that the Panama Canal and the canal areas cannot and will not be controlled by China.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth today in Panama. On Tuesday, he toured the Panama Canal with that country's president, Jose Raul Mulino, and the two agreed to increase security coordination. The Washington Post writes shortly after Hegseth and Mulino met, the Chinese embassy in Panama criticized the U.S. government in a statement on X, saying Washington had used blackmail to further its own interests, and that who Panama carries out business with is a sovereign decision of Panama and something the U.S. doesn't have the right to interfere in. Former employee of Facebook, Sarah Wynne Williams, testified today before a Senate subcommittee that Meta threatened U.S. national security by working with Chinese officials on technologies like artificial intelligence. Accusations laid out in her memoir, Careless People. She said in her opening statement that Meta executives lied about what they were doing with the Chinese Communist Party to employees, shareholders, Congress, and the American public, and said, I saw Meta executives repeatedly undermine U.S. national security and betray American values to win favor with Beijing and build an $18 billion business in China. The subcommittee chair, Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, had these questions for Sarah Wynne Williams.
Let's talk about what Meta has been willing to do for profit and power. You said just a moment ago that Meta's dishonesty started with the betrayal of core American values, and you mentioned that Mark Zuckerberg has pledged himself as a free speech champion. I notice he talks a lot now in the American media about free speech. I notice he talks a lot when he goes to the White House about free speech and how Facebook won't censor and Facebook will protect the rights of all. Have you ever known Mark Zuckerberg to censor on behalf of China?
Yes, Chairman Hawley.
Let's talk about a few specific instances. In 2017, the Chinese dissident Guo Wengyi suddenly had his Facebook profile shut down. Now, Facebook at first said that this was a temporary glitch. Was that true to your knowledge?
No, Senator Hawley.
In fact, Facebook shut down this dissident's page. This dissident, as you pointed out a moment ago, was living on American soil at the time. Facebook shut down that page based on pressure from the Chinese Communist Party. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Let's just take a look here at the documents. Here's some meeting notes taken shortly after a conversation with a Mr. Chow, who's a Communist Chinese Party member, a government official. Here, Mr. Chow asks Facebook, it says to Facebook that they want Mr. Guo's Facebook page dealt with. The notes say that Chow wants Facebook in China, but there are others who don't, so we Facebook need to take measures and do more in such situations to demonstrate we can address mutual interests. And then they go on to list, here's what we could do. We could do nothing, we could say we can do something, or we can do even more than expected, but we need to provide a response to the Chinese Communist Party on what we can do. So here we have evidence of high-level contacts between Chinese Communist Party officials and Facebook asking for this dissident's page to be taken down, Facebook acknowledging this pressure, saying we need to do something if we want to get the party's cooperation, the government's cooperation. And what happened next?
Well, Senator Hawley, one thing the Chinese Communist Party and Mark Zuckerberg share is that they want to silence their critics. I can say that from a personal experience. So I think they came to the right man. This led to a series of events where eventually this man on American soil was kicked off the platform.
So in April of 2017, following these conversations, Facebook takes down the profile, bans it, of Mr. Guo. Then in September, they make that ban permanent. Now, here's the really interesting thing. When Facebook's general counsel was asked about this directly under oath in a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, he sang a different tune. Senator Rubio asked him directly, was there any pressure from the Chinese government to block his account? Was there any pressure to block his account? The general counsel, Mr. Stretch, no, Senator. We reviewed a report on that account and analyzed it through regular channels using regular procedures. Was this truthful testimony, Ms. Williams?
No, Senator.
It's in fact an outright lie, is it not?
It is, Senator.
We just saw the documentation. Facebook received not just a request, Facebook received direct pressure from the Chinese Communist Party and bowed to it and discussed it internally and planned it and then lied about it to Congress.
Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, chair of the subcommittee on crime and counterterrorism of the Judiciary Committee, questioning former Facebook employee and whistleblower Sarah Wynne Williams. An NBC News report says she is a former New Zealand diplomat who worked at Facebook from 2011 through 17. She believes she was fired in 2017 as retaliation for accusing her boss, Joel Kaplan, who at the time was a vice president for global public policy, of sexual harassment. Meta, which owns Facebook, said that an investigation cleared Kaplan in 2017 and that Wynne Williams' book, Careless People, included false accusations about our executives. Meta also said other claims in the book were out of date and previously reported, and a former supervisor said she was fired for performance reasons. That was from NBC News. From CBS News, billionaire entrepreneur and space traveler Jared Isaacman, President Trump's nominee to serve as NASA's next administrator, told lawmakers Wednesday he supports sending astronauts back to the moon in the Artemis program, but plans to prioritize eventual trips to Mars. Along with President Trump's call to eventually send astronauts to Mars, senior advisor Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, has called NASA's Artemis moon program a distraction and jobs maximizing program, not a results maximizing program. That was from CBS News. Here's part of today's hearing before the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. The chair, Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, questioning the nominee.
When we met in my office, you said beating China back to the moon was, quote, critical for our national interests. You also said that if President Trump turns on the television and sees Chinese astronauts on the surface of the moon before Americans, you said you would be fired that day. In your written testimony, however, you said, quote, we will prioritize sending American astronauts to Mars. There seems to be a bit of tension between the commitment you made in my office and your testimony. What is your view? Will you maintain course with the Artemis program so that we can return American astronauts to the moon before President Trump leaves office?
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the statement. First, I couldn't agree more with the president and his inspiring and ambitious goal to send American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on Mars. He didn't say we shouldn't go to the moon. I suspect the president, as I feel, and probably a lot of Americans, is what's taking us so long to get back to the moon, and why does it cost so much money? I absolutely want to see us return to the moon. As I mentioned in my prepared remarks, determine the economic, scientific, and national security value while we are also proceeding towards Mars. I don't think we have to make any tough trades here, Senator. I think if we can concentrate our resources with the world's greatest space agency, we don't have to make a binary decision of moon versus Mars, or moon has to come first versus Mars. I think we could be paralleling these efforts and doing the near impossible, which is exactly why the American taxpayers funded NASA in the first place.
Jared Isaacman, nominee for NASA administrator, questioned by Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, at today's Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee hearing. Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, asked him about Elon Musk, owner of SpaceX and close advisor to President Trump.
Mr. Isaacman, you have deep personal and financial ties to Elon Musk. You have invested tens of millions of dollars in SpaceX. You have paid millions of dollars to SpaceX for 2 private space flights. Your payments company, Shift4, has an ongoing, quotes, global strategic partnership with Starlink worth millions each year. And according to a recent Wall Street Journal report, Musk personally asked you to lead NASA. Given SpaceX's significant interest before NASA, you can understand why the public would be concerned about conflicts of interest here. So let's try to set a few things straight. I understand that you met with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago in late 2024. Is that correct?
No, Senator. I was in Mar-a-Lago to be interviewed by the President of the United States.
So you did not meet with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago?
I went to Mar-a-Lago to be interviewed by the President of the United States.
I didn't ask you that. Did you meet with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago?
I believe he was one of dozens of people that were around Mar-a-Lago at the time, Senator.
So did you meet with him?
I would not say we had a meeting. We probably had a conversation in passing, Senator.
Okay, during that same trip, then President-elect Trump offered you the NASA administrator job. Is that correct?
At the conclusion of the meeting, Senator, he did.
Thank you. Was Elon Musk in your meeting when Trump offered you the NASA position at Mar-a-Lago?
Senator, I was interviewed by the President of the United States.
Was Elon Musk in the meeting when he offered you the job?
Senator, my meeting was with the President of the United States.
So Elon Musk was not in the meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Senator, I was being interviewed and speaking with the President of the United States.
You can just say he was not in the meeting. Was he in the meeting or not in the meeting?
Senator, I'm trying to be as transparent as I can. I was being interviewed by the President of the United States.
It's not a difficult question. Was Elon Musk in the room when the President offered you the job?
Senator, my meeting was with the President of the United States.
I'm assuming that you don't want to answer the question directly because Elon Musk was in the room. I think that's the only conclusion anyone listening to this could reach, unless you want to dispel us of that notion.
Senator, again, I was being interviewed by the President of the United States, and I'd also say I have no...
that's not... I appreciate that. I'm just trying to determine Elon Musk's role in this, and you're not willing to be fully transparent. Have you discussed your plans for NASA with Elon Musk?
I have not.
So those questions obviously raise serious questions.
Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, questioning NASA Administrator nominee Jared Isaacman at today's Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee hearing. You can find the video of the full hearing at our video library, cspan.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.